Hey guys, I'm Aditya Iyer from BugGyaan, and today we'll be going through a tutorial on how to install Ubuntu 18.04 Bionic Beaver on your laptops. Today we'll be doing a virtual machine install and not a dual boot. However, the difference is very slight and most of the steps remain the same, so people who are looking for a dual boot can watch the video as well. I'll be highlighting where things would be a little bit different for you. Linux is a very important operating system in present day because it's used in a multitude of applications. It's taught at colleges. It's used for development. It's used for running robotics codes. It's used for testing software. It's used for simulations and various other features. And it's also used for cybersecurity, such as Kali Linux. So we feel like it's important that people really need to embrace Linux. So here it is, installation tutorial for Ubuntu 18.04. Yeah, so firstly, I'd like to dwell a little bit about what Bugbase is. Bugbase is India's first consolidated bug bounty platform where companies can host crowdsourced bug bounties and we connect ethical hackers to companies. So hackers can come on our platform, report bugs, and win bounties. What are you waiting for? Head to bugbase.in and sign up. So let's get started with the tutorial. Um, Firstly, what you'll have to do is install a disk image. So if you've read the BugGyaan blog, and if you haven't, please do go read it. It's on our LinkedIn page and it's on Medium. So essentially, I wrote an article about how virtual machines essentially work and what disk images are. So you'll have to install an Ubuntu disk image, which essentially contains the basic file system for the Ubuntu kernel, the Ubuntu operating system, and the Linux kernel. So yeah, essentially, you'll have to go to this website ubuntu.com, download desktop, scroll all the way down to um, go to alternative downloads, um, 18.04 LTS Bionic Beaver. So this is the one that we're looking for. Funny, it's named Bionic Beaver actually. The story the story behind it being named Bionic Beaver is pretty funny. I mean, it's considered b- to be named Bionic Beaver because beavers are supposed to signify the pinnacle of engineering on animals. So it's essentially a tribute to every developer out there who's helped in maintaining Linux, considering it's an open source software. So yeah, basically, what you're looking for is this 2 GB file, which is titled desktop image for 64-bit PC. Now, I have a 64-bit PC, and it's a standard download. So, if you have a 32-bit, download it accordingly. So, just click on the link and it will download it for you. I already have it downloaded in the desktop. Um, yep, here it is. So, it's there already. So, yeah, you will also have to install a virtual machine software. So essentially, a virtual machine software is a software that enables you to run disk images on your laptop and allow you to run multiple operating systems. So one of the best virtual machine softwares that I've been using for a long time is VirtualBox by Oracle, and I mean it's one of the best. So especially if you're starting out, it's free, it's really useful, and it's really user friendly. So I'd recommend VirtualBox. You're welcome to try other operating systems, but and of course other virtual machine. You're welcome to try other virtual machines, but for this tutorial, I'll be using VirtualBox. So yeah, here you go. Windows host. If you're on a Windows platform, download this. If you're on OS X, which is essentially Mac, download this, and it's there for Linux distribution, Solaris as well. So yeah. I already have it downloaded, so just click on save and go through the instructions. The wizard will guide you through. So yeah, open up your Oracle VM manager window, and this is what it's going to look like. So as you can see, it's pretty simple. It's not that complicated. You have file, machine, and help. So yeah, you're all set to get started. So you have your virtual machine application ready. You have your disk image installed. So go ahead and click on new. So essentially, it has its own wizard for creating virtual machines. I'll guide you through it step by step. So you can name it anything. I'll just name it test Ubuntu, and Oracle has this interesting feature where it reads the name from the name of the OS. It tries to figure out the name of the OS from the name that you enter. Um, let's see. Yep, works pretty well. So yeah, step back. Yeah, so Ubuntu 64-bit. Again, I'm reminding you, mine is a 64-bit system, so I'm using Ubuntu 64-bit. Type is of course Linux. As I said in my blog article, that Linux is a kernel, not an operating system, and Ubuntu is the operating system which adds the essential tools for the user to be able to use it. So yeah, that's clearing that out. Click on next. So essentially, memory size is the amount of available RAM that you really want to dedicate to your virtual machine. So it can range anywhere from minimum to minimum's 4 MB, and I have 32 gigabytes of RAM on my laptop right now. So I'll probably allocate around 8 GB. That's one fourth. If you have an 8 GB laptop, you can allocate 4 GB. That's completely fine. It ideally should be half of your laptop's RAM. But if you have larger RAM like I do, you can allot one fourth or even 1/8 if it's that big. So yeah, ideally 8 GB works unless you really want to use simulations on a really high level and render um, a large amount of data. Then I guess you could give it 16. But yeah, 8 GB should work. All right. So now here's the thing, right? You basically, how a virtual machine works is that it creates something called a virtual hard disk, which is essentially a partition of the memory space that's already present on your laptop, and it creates a virtual disk and uses that disk as the storage location for the file system of your operating system. So basically, if you have an SSD that has 1 TB and you decide to allocate 100 GB to a virtual disk, that virtual disk will become your Linux operating system, and you will have 100 GB of space in it. And your Windows will have 900 GB right now, right? So yeah, 1 TB minus 100. So that's essentially how a virtual hard disk works. So you can choose not to add a virtual hard disk, but it's highly recommended that you do. If you already have one, basically they're saved in the format of dot um, dot virtual machine or dot VML. Uh, so yeah, those type of virtual hard disks, if you already have them, you can just choose them from the drop down. But I don't clearly, so I'll create a new one. Um, they've said that the recommended size is 10 GB, but we'll get to that. Okay, so there are essentially three main types of virtual hard disk, right? So the first one is the VirtualBox Disk Image, or the VDI. So VDI was when virtual machines started out. It was the industry standard for virtual hard disks, and basically the thing with VDI is that it doesn't allow incremental recoveries. So basically, if you have an updating backup that's going on, VDI wouldn't allow it. So what would happen is that it would lead to a lot of redundancy, and essentially, um, it would it would it would lead to you losing out on a lot of data if something goes wrong. And that's the whole point behind virtual machines, right? If something goes wrong, you want to save your data. So yeah, well, it kind of defeats the purpose, but it's not that common, so people used it. VHD is actually a newer version compared to VDI. However, it has quite a bit of malware vectors that might penetrate it and corrupt your virtual machine. And there is a chance there have been cases where it's spilled over to the original native operating system on your laptop. So VHD is not recommended. VMDK or virtual machine disk is new technology that's one of the best. It allows incremental backups and it has layering, it has pictures or snapshots of operating systems, which essentially means you can save the system state itself and revert or roll back to previous versions when the OS was good. And yeah, so let's say your OS goes bad after, um, let's say 2 days of testing, you can roll back to 2 days prior and start off from where you were. So VMDK is one of the best ways to create hard disks, so just use that. Yeah, so coming to storage on a physical disk, right? So there are two types of storage that virtual machines uses. One being dynamically allocated, which essentially means if you have 8 GB physical hard disk or in this case a virtual hard disk, and your computer needs more than 8 GB of space, what it would do is it would extend it till whatever you needed, let's say 10 GB. So then what would happen is your virtual hard disk would become of the size 10 GB, but when the need decreases, when you again need 6 GB instead of 10 GB, you wouldn't, the storage of the virtual hard disk would not decrease back to 8 GB, it would stay at 10 GB. So that's essentially a dynamically allocated hard disk. And what would happen is, let's say you've maxed out your CPU resources on one of your test runs. You've used up all of your data into your virtual space into your virtual hard disk, right? So essentially your memory is screwed. So that's the reason why dynamically allocated is not preferred unless you're using it for very casual purposes, like if you're installing Linux for running code on code blocks or for your college purposes, then yeah, go ahead with dynamically allocated, not a problem. But if you're running Unity engines, if you're running Gazebo simulators and other 3D rendering softwares, Blender, I'd recommend using a fixed size virtual hard disk. So yeah, there's also a very interesting option that's come in the new Oracle update where you can split these files into less than 2 GB. This essentially increases the rate at which they can be transferred onto an external hard disk. So this would allow you to back up your data much faster. I'm not selecting it here because again it's a tutorial, but if you want to, then it would be a good idea to. Right, let's go ahead. So again, yeah, essentially you're deciding the size of your virtual hard disk, and again, it's in megabytes, and my storage ranges from 4 MB to 2 TB. I have a 2 TB SSD. So yeah, I'll probably give about 50 GB. So here's the thing, right? If you're using very heavy software, I'd recommend 100 GB, and if you're doing 100 GB, I'd suggest just double the amount of size for the partitions that I'm going to do in the future. We'll get to that, but yeah, just remember that if you're multiplying the amount of space that you're giving in the virtual hard disk, multiply the partition size by that much as well. Okay. So let's go ahead and create one. I'll just give it to. Yeah, I think I can just type it. Cool. Okay. Yeah, it's gonna take some time. Well, while we wait for that, I essentially Linux is one of the fundamentals for cybersecurity and cybersecurity professionals, especially Kali Linux, because there's a lot of tools that Linux has developed for cybersecurity. So again, free to explore it, and Bugbase has resources on its website as well. So head over to our website and check that out if you guys want to get started. Yeah, so my download's done. Setup's done. So okay, so here comes one of the technical parts that you'll have to do. So essentially that's our virtual machine. Go to its settings. You have to set the disk image of the virtual machine to the image that you downloaded previously. Remember, we didn't do that yet. So head over to storage. So essentially here you have something called controller IDE, right? So these are essentially the disk image that's being used to run natively on the virtual machine. Um, so this IDE is what's by default executed when you start your virtual machine. So you'd like to set that to the disk image. As you can see now it's empty. And here is my controller. And guys, remember it's saved in the .vmdk format, which is essentially virtual machine disk. So yeah, this was the 49 GB virtual hard disk that you created. So yeah, it's there, it's created. It's of type SATA. So yeah, to set the disk image, click on the empty sign and click on this disk image option. So choose a create virtual hard disk. Now these two might not appear to you because I've set up this before, so these are right here for me to use. If in case these aren't here, just click on add, go to the place where you've saved it, and you can see it's in desktop. It's called an ISO file. I use a software called Power ISO to use these ISO files and manipulate them. However, it might just show up as a disk image or as an ISO file. But yeah, the name is pretty recognizable. So just select it, click on open, and it'll show up. Just verify that it's 2.04 GB. That's a pretty standard size. So yeah, there we have it. And click on choose, and yeah, you can see it's Ubuntu 18.04.5 desktop. All right. Click on OK. Another cool thing that you can do is if you want stuff to be transferred from your original native operating system to your um, virtual machine, here's a trick that you can do. Go to general, go to advanced, shared clipboard, set that to bidirectional. So basically what you copy from your virtual machine, you can paste it on your native OS, and what you copy on your native OS can be pasted on your virtual machine. And again, drag and drop. If you set that to bidirectional, you can drag and drop tabs all the way from your native OS to the virtual machine and vice versa. So yeah, it really saves a lot of your time actually. If you didn't select these, then you can't transfer any sort of information of the input devices such as your keyboard and your mouse from your virtual machine to your native OS. So it would be a pain. So yeah, that's one of the tips that you can do. Again, you can increase your base memory. You can actually set the number of processors that it's going to use. Well, I have 10 cores, so I'll probably set 4. Yeah, execution cap, essentially how much percentage of resources you allow the virtual machine to use. And acceleration is essentially hardware virtualization, which essentially allows you to basically run graphics. So yeah, again, you can calibrate your display, your video memory, monitor count. You can configure your remote display. You can set your audio settings, and if you want to use an external hard drive, then what you'll have to do is go to USB. So you see there are no USB devices here, right? So go to add USB. So again, I have my Intel chip, I have my Tobii eye tracking, my Alienware Corporation, and this Western Digital Technologies is a portable hard drive, a 1 TB hard drive that I've connected. So just select that and click OK. Yeah, so you should be able to access that hard drive. Okay, that shouldn't have happened. Okay, yeah. All right. So yeah, basically you can do that. I'll remove it for now. You can do this later on after your installation. I'd recommend you do it after your installation because it can mess up how your memory is dealt later. So yeah, don't do this before. Yeah. So just start your virtual machine. So yeah, the virtual box opening, loading screen, and yeah, wait for it to load. Okay, it's a classic sound Ubuntu has. Okay, so yeah, here you go. This is your starting screen. So essentially, you have two options. You can either try Ubuntu or you can install Ubuntu directly from the loading screen. So when you say try Ubuntu, it runs something called a virtual server or a live server, which is essentially an instance of the Linux kernel and it's temporary. So as soon as you end the live USB server, you are going to lose everything that you did at that live server. It's an instance, so it doesn't last forever. And yeah, so you wouldn't want that, right? Unless you're doing something that you don't want or you just want a quick setup, you just try Ubuntu. And yeah, I mean, you can try Ubuntu without installing it. So if you click on try Ubuntu, select language here. You can select English if you're English. There are a few errors that happen, but that's fine. So yeah, you can just, there you go. There's your file system, battery. So by default, Ubuntu reads your Wi-Fi as an Ethernet connection. It reads it as a wired connection, so don't freak out. You do have internet and you're not using an Ethernet. It is still Wi-Fi, but your virtual machine reads it as, well, yeah. So there you go. You have, okay. All right. Okay, so yeah, basically, if you saw the download, you might have seen something called LTS. Well, the word LTS actually means long time support. Uh, Essentially, when you're installing Ubuntu distributions, it's preferable that you install an LTS version because these often have secure builds that are maintained in the public and they're tested and triaged again and again before they're actually put out in the public domain. So they give you security, they're stable, things like that. So that's essentially what the Ubuntu LTS means. And 18.04 Bionic Beaver is one of the most stable builds and one of the most popular builds. It has a support for a wide array of applications, as I said, and it supports almost everything that Linux should support. Um, so yeah, I personally develop on robot operating system, and yeah, since I use ROS Melodic, it's not supported on further versions of Ubuntu. That's 20.04 and 21.04. So yeah, that's why I had to install 18.04. So yeah, it's pretty stable. I've used it for almost a year. Yeah, it's really good. All right. Once you get into Linux, you wouldn't feel like going back. But yeah, that's up to you. Yeah. So in case you clicked try it now by mistake and want to actually install it, Um, yeah, in case you clicked try it now by mistake and want to actually install it, just click on install Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. It'll take you to the same screen. Choose your language, continue. Again, it asks you to choose a keyboard layout and a keyboard language. So let's see if it works. Okay. Nice. Okay. Yeah, well, that didn't work, but that's alright. I mean, yeah, I probably choose English US anyway. But yeah, you have the Macintosh version, interestingly. So if you guys want that, you can choose that. But I'll just go with English US and English US again. Okay, so continue. Okay, now updates and other software. So essentially, Ubuntu comes with a lot of third party software and graphics drivers and a lot of applications that involve graphics. So these are proprietary softwares that you actually install from an app store. They're posted on the app store. So if you want them on your laptop as soon as you start and as soon as you install, you usually select install third party software for graphics. Remember that this needs an active Wi-Fi connection. So if you don't have an active Wi-Fi connection, don't select this option. But if you do, go ahead. It's not going to hinder your download. Probably lengthen it by, I guess, a minute. So yeah, doesn't matter. And now we wait again. Okay, so next there's a prompt for installation type. So you have quite a few options here. Usually this is where things start getting complicated and people mess up their Ubuntu installs. Uh, Please be really careful when you're installing Ubuntu. I'd suggest keeping out an hour of your time for installing Ubuntu and focus. So yeah, this is where usually people mess up their Ubuntu installation. Um, they kind of get into a hurry with choosing the options. So I recommend keeping an hour out for an Ubuntu install. If it's on a VM, probably half an hour. But yeah, please do stay focused throughout the entire tutorial. Follow it to the T, and you won't have a problem at all. I've done multiple VM installs and dual boots. I haven't really faced a lot of problem until now if you follow the process methodically. Alright, so you have installation type. You can choose to erase the entire disk and install Ubuntu. It's kind of a brute force way. As the warning says, it will delete everything that you have. So that's not a recommended option and it's not used. These two options are interesting. Ubuntu actually allows you to encrypt your installation. So essentially, what that means is when you create a disk image from your operating system, the disk image will be encrypted and you'll need a password to use it. So yeah, that's essentially what the encryption means. Cool feature. I think Linux did a really good job by introducing that in terms of security. Use LVM with the new installation. So LVM is essentially a management system for logical memory units. So it allows for easier partitioning and copying files from one place to another, and it also helps create snapshots, as I said, of the operating system um, at certain stages. So yeah, so these are options that you can select only if you reformat the disk, that is, you erase everything on the disk and do a fresh install with only Ubuntu on it. As I said, it's not usually recommended, but if you want to do this, go ahead. It's pretty simple. You can just click on install now. Ubuntu will essentially do the general install. It will create one root partition that will have all your files, everything. So it will have a root partition which will have all the required files, and you'll have a boot partition where you'll have the bootloader, which essentially used to load the operating system. So these are the only two things that will be created by default, and it'll use up all the memory that you have. So usually people who are getting into Linux would not like this. and they would want to have some sort of customizability. As I said, it's open source and they want to allow people to customize their own installs. So you can choose a something else option and create and resize the partitions yourself. Note that this is a little bit more risky than the erase disk and install option, but yeah, there's no need to worry, you can do it. So yeah, click on continue. So you might come to a screen where it says dev sta. So this is essentially a memory unit. As you can see, the 53.6 virtual hard disk, that the VBox or the VirtualBox hard disk that we created is right there. It's just dev sta. There's only one thing selected. If I had allowed USB connections previously, my Western Digital hard disk would show up as well. So that's not basically, if you click on this, you would get two options. One would be the WD hard disk, and the other would be dev SDA. It would come as SDA1, SDA2, or SDA-A, SDA-B. So you can select whatever you want to. You can install it on an external hard disk. It's very versatile, but yeah, for now I'll just stick to this. So as you see, device for bootloader installation, right? So this is where your bootloader is going to be installed. Now you might see that there's nothing here, right? None of the options are enabled, and well, you can see that's a bar with actually the memory, right? So yeah, if you come to this stage, all you need to do is click on new partition table. So essentially, what this does is you're creating a huge partition with the 53.6 GB, and you're allowing yourself to format that partition into multiple smaller partitions, so that essentially forms a partition table. So that's what Linux is trying to do. I mean, yeah, this would again erase that part of the disk. So if you already had partitions on your disk, they would show up here. So you can select the individual partition that's empty, create a partition table in that empty partition, and install your Linux. So yeah, click on the empty partition. It will show up here. So click on new partition table, continue, and as you can see, I have 53 GB of free space. So select that. So essentially, this plus button is used to create partitions. You'll basically need three main partitions to set up the minimalistic Ubuntu operating system. That's your root, your home, and your swap. So let me just explain what these are in brief. So your root is essentially the entirety of your operating system, everything it encompasses, literally everything that's in your file system. The recommended amount is around 25 GB. That should satisfy all of your needs unless you're running Dockers or other container software where you'd require double that, but otherwise 25 GB should do. Basically, whenever you install a new package or you install a software, it adds on to your root file system. So yeah, that's your root file system. You have something called a swap partition, which is essentially, if you have, let's say, 8 GB of RAM, and all that 8 GB is used up. If you needed more RAM, your computer would start using your swap partition as a RAM space. So yeah, you would, if you had 8 GB RAM and 4 GB swap, you would have 12 GB of RAM with you. So yeah, that's the idea. I mean, swap partitions is really debatable whether you want to use them or not. I personally use them because I do a lot of rendering and I do a lot of simulations. So yeah, I would prefer a swap partition. If you don't, that's completely fine. You can just have a root and a home, but I'd recommend a swap partition. And ideally, the size for your swap partition should be half the amount of RAM that you have for laptops that are lesser than 8 GB. 8 GB. So if you have an 8 GB laptop, the recommended swap space would be 4 GB. However, if you have a 16 GB laptop, you can give 16 gigs of space for the swaps partition. That works. So yeah, it's essentially, in case it's not used, it will go to waste, and people don't like wasting memory. It's costly. So yeah, that's the main idea behind saving swap space. But if you want to give it, you can. All right. So as I said, I'll be giving 25 gigs of RAM. Apologies. I'll be giving so as I said, I'll be giving 25 gigs to the root partition, which is essentially just the slash. So remember these settings. These settings have to be exactly as they are. So you are creating a logical partition at the beginning of the space. So when you say beginning or end, you essentially mean whether it's here or here. So that doesn't really matter. Just a question of how you use the free space given to you. But yeah, I prefer beginning because everything is ordered and sequential. So yeah, create a 25 GB partition. Um, by default, all Linux file systems have ext4 journaling. So that's the standard for Linux. Yeah, so they show up as ext4 even if you open Windows CMD and then you look at your partitions, they show up as ext4, and those are Linux partitions. So yeah, you mount 25 GB to your root. Remember, root is just a slash. Yeah, and you should see it. Half of it filled up, approximately 25 GB. Free space is 28 GB, as you can see here. So select the free space, select the home partition, and so I have 32 gigs of RAM on my laptop, so I'll probably be giving 8 gigs of swap considering this is a tutorial. So I keep 20 gigs as my home file system. So essentially your home file system is like a part of your root file system. So you have the root file system and you have the home folder. So the home folder that you create with the 20 GB is actually tied to your root file system, and it's like a 20 GB folder inside a 40 GB folder. So that essentially gives you 20 GB of empty space for your home partition alone. So yeah, this is used to actually increase the size of your home partition. I personally use a 250 gigs SSD, so I just give 100 gigs as home because everything is stored on your home partition. It can be stored on your home partition, movies, videos, everything. So yeah, if you want your root to be less burdened and you want your home file system to bear the brunt of it, then yeah, go ahead, give a lot more to your home partition. So yeah, I'd give 20 gigs and click okay. So you have your root, you have your home, and now it's time you have 8 gigs left. So to create a swap partition, the file system that is not it's going to use is not ext4. You'll have to change it to swap area, and as you see, it disappears. The mounting point disappears, so you just need to click okay, and yep, you can see the bars filled up. That means you've used the complete 53 GB that you had, and you've created your partition successfully. Congratulations. And yeah, all you need to do now to install is just click install now. It does warn you that you're creating new partitions, but yeah, I mean, you are creating partitions, so yeah, click on continue. It's not going to harm your computer. Partitions are just blocks of memory and chunks of memory that are kept together, so there's no harm in creating partitions at all. So choose your time zone, live in Bangalore, so Kolkata, and you can name it anything. Lava Hawk. And guys, as I said, choosing a strong password is something that is really important for securing your system. So yeah, please do choose a good password because we at Bugbase always um, profess cybersecurity. And yeah, keeping a good password is actually a really good practice. So okay, um, click on continue, and yeah, there you have it. Famous beaver of the bionic beaver build. It has so essentially the reason people like to use Linux is because it's a command line operating system. It's extremely user efficient and it doesn't have a lot of GUI, which is heavy. It's not laggy like how Windows is, purely because of the load that the GUI puts on it. But Ubuntu 18.04 has quite a bit of GUI that you can use. So yeah, it's kind of the perfect meet in the middle between GUI and non-GUI applications, and yeah, it's pretty much perfect. So yeah, well, you can see the installation's pretty quick, really quick for an operating system. Um, yeah, they have multiple softwares. They have large amount of software. You can get everything that you need on a Linux system. Um, and yeah, so while this does install, check out Bugbase's blog, check out Bugbase's podcast, check out our Instagram page, check out our website, because we put a lot of effort into maintaining it and getting content to you. So please do check them out and show some love. So it's installing the file system. So basically, the reason you see removing a lot is because it installs the basic um, system resources that it needs to actually be able to install the disk image and the files. So it installs the softwares, installs the files using those softwares, and then removes those softwares. So yeah, that's basically what it does. And yeah, should be done in some time. Shouldn't take too long. You can actually see what's going on over here if you want to. Yeah, you can see in the terminal it's just being printed what exactly is happening. If you know how to read terminals, then yeah, go ahead, knock yourselves out. So yeah, minimize that. See the bar. Yep, so at its final stage, it's installing the disk image. Actually, the entire file system and the disk image is stored remotely on GitHub. So it actually clones it from there and installs it. So yeah, as the message says, the installation is done. Remember that you selected try Ubuntu at the starting, so it allows you to continue testing it, but it won't become a permanent setting on the virtual machine until you restart. So yeah, just click on restart now. So yeah, it says please remove the installation medium, then press enter. Well, you don't have an installation medium. So essentially, the entire process that we did right now, from the try Ubuntu, was what you would do if you're dual booting. It would essentially remain exactly the same. You would take a USB, you would plug it in, you would burn the disk image on the USB, you would plug the USB in, you would go to load from USB. So we'll do this as a separate video later, but if you want to try it out and you want to dual boot, then you can just create a live environment on a USB, plug it in, load the operating system from USB, and all you have to do is do the same thing that we did. Try Ubuntu, open the installer, install it, create the partitions, and let it run. It'll install it for you and it'll come to this page. So this is where things are different. If you press enter here, it will just open the VirtualBox again. But that on your computer when you're dual booting is equivalent to your computer restarting. So all it would do is your computer would restart. You would get a grub menu where Ubuntu and Windows would be listed, or whatever other operating system you have. Select Ubuntu in that, and that would take you to this page. So that's basically how you dual boot it. We'll do a video later, but that's the gist. So yeah, press space, enter the password. So yeah, There you go. You have Ubuntu installed. So essentially, this is a really important part of Ubuntu's security system, where it creates a live patch and it helps you keep a track of what happens on your computer. You can set it up. You just need to enter your password and create an Ubuntu account, and you would basically set up live patch. So I'll not do that now. You can do that. You can report to Ubuntu any problems that you have. And yeah, as I said, there's a wide array of software that you can choose from. I mean, these are all. Shortcut is a great video editor. Brave is a great Brave is a great web browser. Sublime Text is a great text editor. Um, Visual Studio Code is a great IDE. Oh, alright. Yeah. So essentially, as soon as you install Ubuntu 18.04, you'll get a message saying that there's 20.04 available. So the process for installing 20.04 is literally exactly the same. So if you really want to install 18.04 and try 20.04, you can do it, but I would just recommend downloading the 20.04 ISO and using that. There are reasons why you would want to use only 18.04 and not shift to 20. Like, for example, as I said, ROS Melodic, which I use, robot operating system, isn't supported on 20.04, so I'd stick to 18. So in those cases, just click on don't upgrade, or if you really want to consider it later, you can ask me later. So yeah, again, it reminds you that you've declined the update. This is a LTS version, or long time support, so there shouldn't be any reason that you should be scared of not taking the update. So yeah, OBS Studio is a great recording software. GNU manipulation is a great photo editing software. Of course, you have Discord, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Spotify, VLC media player. Great array of software. So yeah, done. As soon as you do install it, there are quite a few updates that it needs to do. You can just open this and look at what all updates are there. Yeah, so the thing is, Linux already comes inbuilt with a GNU GCC compiler, so you really don't need to stress about that. It comes pre-installed with it. However, you'll have to install Python. So yeah, just click on install now, and yeah, that'll be running in the background. So essentially, you're the administrator, and it will require your password for any sort of administrative activity, such as installing software. So yeah, this is it, guys. This is essentially Ubuntu 18.04 installed on your laptop. I could show you a few commands on the terminal. For example, ls just lists all the folders that are there. Cd or change directory is used to move into a particular directory. So as you see, it changed from that tilde to tilde slash desktop. So you're in the desktop folder. So if you do ls, nothing comes up because it's empty. So I just say pwd or publish working directory. It basically tells you my location, which is home, lava hawk, desktop. Oops, I guess I opened the music player. Yeah, this is a music player. It's called to the box. As I said, it connects via wired. It treats it as a wired connection for some reason. So yeah, if you want to make it full screen, as you see now, it's not full screen, right? So you can just go to devices, insert guest addition CD image, and this is essentially a graphic tools addition or an add-on to the virtual machine that allows you to get it full screen. I mean, if you're doing some quick commands or doing something for a college course, this is enough. Yeah, so you can just say mkdir hello. So that'll just create a folder. Now when I do list, hello appears. So Nano is a popular text editor. If you saw a recent post about Vim is a text editor. So all right. Well, yeah. So I guess Nano comes pre-installed. So you can just do Nano hello world. Just enter that and Control O to write. Press Enter. Control X to exit and echo hello. Yeah, there you go. So hello comes in. The echo command is just used to print whatever you type after the echo command. So yeah, that's about it. So there you have it. Ubuntu 18.04 installed. So thank you guys for watching. Um, Again, Bugbase is India's first consolidated bug bounty platform, and we would really appreciate it if you could head out to our social media platforms, keep supporting us like you already have. Keep sharing our content to people who need it, and let's hope to build a secure India. So that's Bugbase signing off. Thank you.